This is the Stubborn Gladness Podcast. I'm your host, Maggie Hollinbeck. I'm a psychotherapist, writer, teacher, and an avid student of happiness. I'm just thrilled that we're here together. This podcast is all about mental health, how to heal it, enjoy it, and protect it. I'm excited to share what I've learned in my 20 plus years working in the field. If you want to take a more active role in cultivating gladness in your life and tending to yourself when the world hits you hard, this is the place for you. Let's dive in. Welcome to episode 1. I want to talk about ways that we can really cultivate a grounded positivity in our lives, a grounded intention to look at what is good in our lives, despite, not even despite, but even with everything else that comes along with it in our own personal lives and in the wider world. I first heard this term, stubborn gladness. I first read it in Elizabeth Gilbert's book, Big Magic, an incredible book, by the way. And that term really stuck with me. And she introduced it as something that is a very central practice in her life. I thought that was so interesting that she practiced gladness. I think there's probably something that appealed to my Midwestern nature about the term. I think of us Midwesterners as somewhat stubborn, grounded, very much of the earth people. And there's something about this idea of really pulling gladness up from the earth, right? Up by the roots. And we are going to take it no matter what, because it is an essential nutrient, even in and especially in hard times. And that term has stayed with me as a bit of a touchstone over these last 10 years. And these 10 years were not an easy time, I think, for all of us. For me personally, I lost my father during that time. I survived breast cancer twice during that time. We all survived a pandemic. We all survived a difficult and increasingly difficult political climate here in America and really around the world. And during that time, that term kept coming back to me. And I didn't engage with it really fully, but it would come to me as, yeah, Liz Gilbert, she holds that as a practice. What would it be like if I practiced it? And at the beginning of this year, I was searching for my word of the year every year, not every single year, but for the last 13, 15 years or so, many years, I have started the year by choosing a word or a phrase that I want to use as an anchor for the year, something to really ground me back into myself, something to guide me forward, something to guide me in my life. I've used different words at different times, and they're fun, right? It's fun to choose something like that, and it can be really powerful to choose something like that and then really, really take it on and live into it throughout the year. And this January, like a lot of people, I was having a lot of emotions about what would be coming later in January with the inauguration of the new president, and was feeling a lot of like, how can we endure this? How can we stay grounded in who we are and who we want to be, while we also take on this very difficult time in our history? I have always been someone who has really tried to lead with love, to lead with compassion. Not perfect by any means. I do not always succeed in that, but that has really been a driving force in my life. And it has been a real trial to maintain that love and compassion, to pull it back up and to practice it at times of such divisiveness, at times of such anger and rancor and dehumanizing in the social media realm and all of that stuff. And so I really thought about, like, how do we hold to ourselves during this time? And how can I, as a mental health professional, who not only have I been experiencing my own mental health challenges during this time. But of course, I sit with a lot of people who have a lot of different feelings and a lot of different opinions about what has happened, and a lot of anxiety and a lot of depression, if I'm perfectly honest. Not by everybody, of course, but those of us who are feeling anxiety and depression, how do we take care of ourselves? How do we stay resilient, stay centered in our core values, even while we fight for this? I had this image recently in my head that in some ways, I, as an American, and for the first time, maybe not for the first time, in recent years, have started to really understand, and I think a lot of Americans are understanding for the first time, that politics is not an amusement park ride. It is not something that we strap in for and we go for the ride, but we know we're not really going to get hurt, and then we get to get off and then make another choice, right? Get back on or go on a different ride. It has become increasingly apparent over these last 10 years that politics is a very serious business. It's a life or death thing. And that we are going to have to hold to our hearts and our intuition and our fire in some different ways in the coming years. I chose this term, this word, stubborn gladness. It's my word of the year. I even got it on a necklace. If you are watching the video, you can see it. I did get the necklace that I wrote about in my Substack a few weeks ago. And I got that to be a touchstone and to be a reminder. And when I decided to take this word on, I did a little research, and I learned that Elizabeth Gilbert had actually coined that term. She was inspired by a poem by the poet Jack Gilbert, who has passed away not that long ago, actually. And she had read his poem, which is called A Brief for the Defense. And when I read this poem, I realized that this term really does have that kind of stubborn, fierce, in the face of whatever may come, agency to it that I had intuitively felt. And I want to read for you the portion of the poem where this came from. I'm just going to read a part of it. And it goes like this. There is laughter every day in the terrible streets of Calcutta, and the women laugh in the cages of Bombay. If we deny our happiness, resist our satisfaction, we lessen the importance of their deprivation. We must risk delight. We can do without pleasure, but not delight, not enjoyment. We must have the stubbornness to accept our gladness in the ruthless furnace of the world. That's pretty deep stuff, isn't it? And when I read that, it reminded me of something I had heard many years ago when I first started doing this work as a therapist. When I very first was working, I was working with kids who were in the foster care system, and it was at times very difficult, heartbreaking work. And I remember reading at one point when I was pretty low and had taken on a lot of the suffering of my clients, I read this quote by Wayne Dyer, which I'm going to not get correct, but I'm going to paraphrase it for you, which essentially said that you cannot do those suffering people any good by getting down in the mud and suffering with them. And that is not to mean that we don't reach down and do what we can to help. And there are times where it is powerful to sit with someone in their suffering. Well, I'm actually going to talk about that at a different point. But what I took it to mean was that by lowering myself down into anxiety and depression and despair in sympathy with another's suffering leaves two of us down in the mud. And what we've got to do is find our light, even in dark times. We've got to find our light and we've got to live it. And to me, that is what this Stubborn Gladness is all about. So just a little takeaway for you. I would love for you to think about what stubborn gladness means to you. What does that bring up for you? Does it draw anything from you in terms of how you might look for gladness to claim in your life, moment by moment? It's not about big joyful peak experiences. It is about really claiming the little grains of sand, the little grains of gladness that are available if you look. That's what it means to me. And I would love to hear what it means for you and where you find it this week if you choose to look for it. So in the show notes, I will include some information about how you can stay in touch with me, either at my Substack or by email. And I would love to hear from you if you have your own experience with stubborn gladness. Thanks for joining me. Stubborn Gladness is produced by Maggie Hollinbeck, all rights reserved. Music is by Dimitro Kovalin from Pixabay. Thanks, Dimitro. Episodes will drop about twice a month, so if you like what you hear, you know what to do. Follow, subscribe, review, and share. You'll find more of my work at my home on Substack. Go to maggiehollinbeck.substack.com or click the link in the show notes. You can subscribe for free or choose a paid plan to become a part of my community with monthly care packages and live gatherings. Love that you stopped by, and I hope you'll make it a habit. Bye for now.